The first $100,000 is not just slow, it feels almost impossible. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the system is working exactly as designed. If you've ever felt like you're working harder every year, earning more, and somehow not getting ahead, this is where that feeling comes from. Imagine sitting at your desk one night, opening a spreadsheet, and seeing your net worth finally approach six figures. You expect relief, you expect momentum, but what you feel instead is exhaustion. Because the climb to that number doesn't feel like progress. It feels like running upward on a descending escalator. For most of your life, you're taught a simple idea. Work more leads to earn more, leads to become secure. A clean, linear equation. But the first $100,000 breaks that illusion. Because this is the phase where effort is real, but progress is heavily resisted. Every dollar you earn is being pulled in multiple directions at once. Taxes take a portion, inflation erodes another, and the cost of simply existing, housing, food, transportation, absorbs the rest. What's left is surprisingly small. This is the resistance phase, a period where your financial momentum is almost entirely consumed by the overhead of your life. You are moving forward, but the system is pushing back just as hard. And that's why it feels so frustrating, because the effort is real, but the results feel invisible. To understand this properly, you have to separate two different forces, the velocity of survival and the velocity of accumulation. Before $100,000, almost everything you earn is used to maintain your position. You're not building, you're sustaining. Your energy turns into income, and that income turns right back into survival. It's a closed loop. And closed loops don't create momentum. Now layer on the psychological pressure. Because as your income increases, something else increases with it. Expectations. This is what's often called the middle class squeeze. At lower income levels, your challenges are obvious. You're trying to pay bills, cover expenses, stay afloat. But as you move higher, towards $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, the problems become less visible and more structural. You enter higher tax brackets. You move into more expensive environments. You adopt a lifestyle that quietly expands to match your income. And this creates a strange paradox. You are more successful on paper, but you feel less secure. Because every increase in income is being absorbed before it can become capital. This is where hedonic adaptation takes hold. The brain doesn't treat your raise as surplus. It treats it as normal. What used to feel like a luxury quickly becomes a baseline. And once it becomes a baseline, it no longer feels like progress. So the finish line moves, and then it moves again, and again, until you find yourself in a state of almost wealth, close enough to see it, but never quite reaching it. And this is where many people make a critical mistake. They assume the problem is personal, that they're not disciplined enough, not optimized enough, not doing something correctly. But in reality, this is a structural phase. The system is designed to extract productivity from the middle tier of earners before allowing them to accumulate real capital. And mathematically, this is the hardest phase you will ever go through. Because at this stage, your money has no leverage. It has no employees. Every dollar must be generated manually, by your time, your energy, your attention. If you break it down, you're fighting a three-front battle. First, taxes. As your income rises, each additional dollar is taxed more heavily. So the more you push, the less efficient your effort becomes. Second, inflation. Even at a modest 3% to 4%, your purchasing power is quietly shrinking every year. So standing still is actually moving backward. Third, the cost of living floor. No matter how productive you become, there is a baseline cost to existing. And that floor doesn't scale down with your effort. It stays high. So your only real lever is your savings rate. But that's a low leverage tool, because there's a limit to how much a human can work, and a limit to how much a human can deprive themselves before the system breaks. And this is where the math becomes discouraging. Because technically, compound interest exists. But at small scale, it's almost invisible. A 7% return on $5,000 is $350. That's it. That number can be erased by a single unexpected expense. A car repair, a medical bill, a rent increase, months of discipline gone in an instant. And that lack of feedback is what makes the wall feel so impenetrable. You are putting in maximum effort for results that look insignificant, not because they are meaningless, but because they are still too small to compound meaningfully. At this stage, the system is not designed to accelerate you. It is designed to keep you functional, to keep you working, earning, spending, providing just enough liquidity to maintain participation, but not enough to escape it. Below $100,000, you are operating under hidden disadvantages, higher interest rates on debt, less access to tax-efficient structures, limited ability to buy back your time. You pay what is often called a poverty tax, not because you lack effort, but because you lack capital. And time, your most valuable asset, is constantly being spent to save small amounts of money. Driving further to save $10, spending hours resolving minor billing issues, optimizing small expenses because you have no choice. And over time, this creates a feedback loop of exhaustion. The more effort it takes to progress, the less energy you have left to think strategically. And that's where many people stop, not because they failed, but because they're tired, right at the point where the system is about to change. Because hidden inside this wall, there is a threshold, and once you cross it, the rules begin to shift. Because once you cross that threshold, something subtle begins to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but fundamentally. At $100,000, your financial life starts to follow a different set of rules. Before this point, every dollar comes from you. After this point, some dollars start coming without you. This is the moment where capital begins to behave differently, where money stops being passive and starts becoming productive. At smaller amounts, returns exist, but they feel insignificant. At $5,000, a 7% return barely registers. It's too small to matter, too fragile to rely on. But at $100,000, that same 7% is $7,000. That's not abstract anymore, that's real. For many people, that's equivalent to a bonus, a raise, months of effort, generated quietly. This is where the silent employee appears. A worker that doesn't sleep, doesn't negotiate, doesn't burn out. It simply compounds. And once it exists, everything accelerates. Because now, you're no longer contributing 100% of the effort. Your capital is contributing with you. The second $100,000 doesn't require the same energy as the first. Not because you work harder, but because you're no longer working alone. Momentum replaces resistance. What once felt like pushing uphill begins to feel like rolling forward. This shift changes more than just your numbers. It changes your position inside the system. Before $100,000, you were playing defense, trying to protect your progress from being erased by expenses, reacting to life. After $100,000, you begin to play offense, positioning your capital, letting systems work for you, making decisions from a place of stability instead of pressure. Financial institutions start to treat you differently. Risk decreases. Access improves. You qualify for better terms, lower interest rates, more efficient tax structures. The same system that once resisted you begins to support you. And more importantly, your relationship with money changes. Before, money was something you spent to survive. Rent, food, bills. Now, money becomes something you deploy, a tool, something that can be positioned to generate more of itself. And this is where a deeper transition begins. Not financial, but psychological. Because for most of your life, your identity is built around earning. Effort equals value. Time equals income. If you're not working, nothing is happening. But at this stage, that belief starts to break. Because now, things are happening, even when you're not. Your capital is working in the background, quietly, consistently, and that creates a tension. Because it requires you to let go of something familiar, the idea that effort must always be visible. This is the shift from earner to steward. A steward doesn't chase every opportunity. A steward protects the system, maintains it, allows it to function without interference. And that's harder than it sounds. Because the instinct is to keep doing, to optimize, to adjust, to react. But compounding doesn't reward activity, it rewards consistency and time. At this level, your greatest risk is no longer lack of effort, it's interference. changing strategies too often, increasing lifestyle too quickly, disrupting momentum before it fully builds. Because once the system is working, your job is no longer to push it, it's to protect it. And if you do that, something else happens. The pressure begins to lift. Not all at once, but gradually. The constant tension of survival starts to fade. You're no longer calculating every expense with the same urgency. You're no longer one unexpected event away from losing progress. Stability becomes real. Not because nothing can go wrong, but because you can absorb it when it does. And that creates something far more valuable than money. Space. Space to think. Space to choose. Space to step back and look at your life more clearly. This is the quiet reality of wealth. It doesn't arrive as a sudden explosion. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like pressure being slowly released, like standing upright after carrying weight for years. And when you look back, you realize something important. The journey to $100,000 was never really about the number. It was about crossing a structural boundary, moving from a system where effort is constantly consumed to one where effort begins to compound, from being fully inside the machine to owning a small piece of it. And once that shift happens, everything that comes after follows a different trajectory. Not because the world changed, but because your position within it did. Wealth doesn't begin when you make more money. It begins when money starts making itself. And for most people, that doesn't happen until after the wall.